Over the past 2 years, the football world has closely followed the journey of one of the sport's most promising talents, Kylian Mbappe. With his blazing speed, incredible finishing, and a hunger for perfection, Mbappe has often been labelled as one of the few players to replace Ronaldo and Messi at the upper echelons of the sport. But hold on one second. Mbappe at the time of recording is now a 25-year-old man, not some teenage or early 20s talent. After winning the World Cup at just 19 years old and scoring in the final, most fans in 2018 would have put money on Mbappe winning a Ballon d'Or by now. But instead, a player of such talent has been wasting his potential by playing in a league that is simply not at his level. And it's his own fault. He was all but set to join Real Madrid in the summer of 2022, but performed an incredible last-minute U-turn to sign a new contract with PSG. And just a year later, he set his intention to not renew this deal that was due to expire in 2024. This led him to being transfer listed, subject to a world record transfer offer from the Saudi League, before then finally being reintegrated back into the PSG squad for the 2023-24 season. And now as he enters the final 6 months of his contract, he is once again a free man to discuss a move to any club of his choosing. Depending on which media outlet you want to believe, Mbappe will either sign a new deal with PSG, finally sign for Real Madrid, or perhaps more surprisingly, join Liverpool. And knowing his history, no doubt Mbappe will leave things to the absolute last minute, and probably perform several U-turns along the way. So what's the point here? Well, Mbappe's indecision reveals one of sport's greatest paradoxes, that being a perfectionist is a double-edged sword. Striving for the best in your career is, of course, a natural desire for any elite performer, and can lead you to push harder in your efforts to become the best version of yourself. But by embracing this trait too much, it can lead to the constant umming and ahhing that has ended up leaving Mbappe's career stagnating for the past few years. In seeking the perfect move for his career, Mbappe has failed to realise a fundamental truth. Perfection doesn't exist. And in chasing this thing that doesn't exist, athletes end up burrowing down a never-ending rabbit hole. The perfectionist is plagued with decision paralysis, where they overthink and analyse every possible option instead of just taking action. And this is what has led Mbappe to wasting a good portion of his career in a league that just doesn't match up to his calibre. The perfectionist, therefore, is also the athlete who ends up missing out on opportunities, both on and off the field. Waiting for the perfect moment to move clubs or the perfect moment to take a shot means that others can easily block off your intentions and actions. And the perfectionist also buys into unrealistic standards. And when those standards obviously don't end up getting met, this leads to disappointment and frustration, which are true performance killers. With all of these things in mind, and from seeing them in athletes I've worked with as a mental performance coach, I've come to a conclusion that many at face value might not agree with. That striving for perfection is the biggest lie athletes have been told. And if you watch the rest of this video, you'll learn the 3 things that the very best athletes do in order to get rid of perfectionism, and in turn free themselves to become true peak performers. So let's get started. So for many sports fans, if you ask them which athlete has the greatest mentality ever, many would say Michael Jordan. And if you ask most fans why they label Jordan as having the GOAT mentality, in their answer they would probably include the statement, he's a perfectionist. But this is only somewhat true. Why? Well, listen to this.
Mentally, I like to challenge myself to go out and play a perfect basketball game. Although I know you can't do that. It's practically impossible to play a perfect game, but that doesn't mean you can't challenge yourself to do that.
What did you notice? MJ has the self-awareness to challenge himself to play the perfect game, but he's not deluded in believing that it's actually possible. So the first thing athletes must do to get rid of their perfectionism and start playing to the best of their ability more consistently is to intend but don't expect. Every night, Michael Jordan would hit the court wanting to push the boundaries of what was truly possible. He intended to make every shot he made, but deep down he didn't become a prisoner in his own mind by actually believing that he had to make every shot. From a psychological standpoint, adopting the approach of intending but not expecting is rooted in a concept called rational optimism. This mindset involves setting high standards and ambitious goals, while simultaneously recognizing the challenges and uncertainties of achieving perfection. By doing so, athletes like Jordan strike a balance between aspiration and pragmatism, meaning that the negative impact of unmet expectations just doesn't faze them. Intending but not expecting is a powerful psychological strategy that helps athletes navigate the frustration that often accompanies imperfect performances. When athletes set unrealistic expectations, they open the door to disappointment, self-doubt, and a destructive cycle of poor performance. But by embracing the intention to perform your absolute best without attaching unrealistic expectations, you will create a healthier mental environment for yourself. This approach fosters resilience, allowing athletes to bounce back from setbacks, learn from experiences, and constantly deliver strong performances. It shifts the focus from an unattainable end goal to a process-oriented mindset where improvement and growth become the primary objectives. Going back to Mbappe and his never-ending transfer fiasco, his problem is that he's expected the teams who want him to literally just bend over for him and let him do whatever he wants to them. And this has now led to Real Madrid taking a far more casual pursuit to getting Mbappe to try and sign for them. They've got half an eye on Erling Haaland instead and have plainly said to Mbappe, if you want to sign, don't f*** us around again and you'll have to take a pay cut. So as an athlete, yes, it's fine to intend for the perfect performance or the perfect career move, but don't expect it, because you know sport is so unpredictable, and the moment you expect something, the rug will be swept from underneath your feet. If you put so much pressure on yourself to have things go perfectly, that pressure can erupt in a meltdown and once again, major disappointment. So what can you do to actually lessen this tension and pressure? Well, let's chat about tennis star Aryna Sabalenka. Early in her career, Sabalenka was known to be an outright perfectionist. And unfortunately, this perfection manifested in angry outbursts, meltdowns, and tears on the court. However, the 26-year-old tennis sensation has found a new perspective, emphasizing the importance of keeping it simple and fun, both on and off the court. Over the past couple of years, she's undergone a remarkable transformation in mentality, which has played a crucial role in her winning back-to-back Australian Open titles in 2023 and 2024, after spending years putting too much pressure on herself to win a Grand Slam. This transformation was most apparent in her recent title defense in Melbourne. Before matches, Sabalenka was seen joking around with her coaching team, engaging in playful warm-up exercises, which included trying to keep balloons from hitting the ground. She also started a bizarre pre-match tradition during her title defense, where she would sign her fitness trainer's head with a marker pen. So what's the point here? Well, to get rid of your perfectionism, sometimes you just need to keep it fun. And this approach to embracing her tennis once again with childlike enthusiasm allowed Sabalenka to dominate the Australian Open, where she didn't feel any of the pressure that came with being the reigning champion. Adopting this more fun approach has several benefits for the perfectionist athlete. Firstly, it helps overcome the intense performance anxiety that perfectionism often breeds. The fear of making mistakes or not executing shots with pinpoint precision can paralyze athletes on the court. Adopting a more fun approach helps alleviate this anxiety, allowing athletes to play with freedom and creativity. The less tense you are, the less those basic errors are going to happen. Also, fun and enjoyment contribute to enhanced focus and concentration. When athletes engage in enjoyable activities, their minds are more likely to find it easier to enter a state of flow, where they can fully immerse themselves in the present moment. In contrast, as said before, perfectionism leads to too much thinking, which blocks off and acts as a barrier of resistance to enter that clear headspace that is needed for a flow state to emerge. And making things more fun also just becomes a sustainable source of motivation. Pursuing perfection can often lead to burnout because you're grinding away at 100 miles an hour for days, weeks, and months on end. And if you want to reach the highest level of sport, it's going to take years of work anyway, so why not make the journey one that's more fun and enjoyable? If something remains fun, we want to keep doing it again and again. It's as simple as that. So if you're in a bit of a perfectionist performance or training rut, ask yourself the question, how could this be more fun? And it doesn't have to be chasing balloons around like a kid. It could be going to the gym with a friend or teammate instead of on your own. It could be setting little bets with teammates like who will score the most goals in a month, or just positive routines and rituals like special handshakes or pre-game dances, whatever. The point is, perfectionism often makes us miserable because we're never satisfied. So you need to deliberately inject some fun so that you can sustainably keep reaching for your best season after season. And I know some of you may be thinking, well, if I have too much fun, won't that be a problem? Doesn't that lead you to not taking things seriously enough? What if I have fun and still don't get near a top performance? Won't that actually make me more miserable in the long run? Well, not necessarily, because there's one last thing that we need to discuss that helps keep perfectionism at bay, even during those moments where we feel like we've performed way off our best. Because I agree, if you're experiencing a bad run of form and have taken a knock in confidence because of that, do you really feel like messing around and having fun before big sports performances? Probably not. So what should you do instead? Well, there's actually a lesson from business that all athletes should think about applying so that they can get back into form but not be plagued by the problems that come with striving for perfection. So let's go back to 2010. Uber was not this global powerhouse that revolutionized how we travel or how we get food and groceries delivered. Instead, the company was focused on one simple issue. How do you get a ride at the push of a button? Because getting a taxi could be a pain. Either they were already full when you tried to hail one down, or it could be a nightmare trying to find a local telephone number to book one, and even then you would get put on hold and have no way of knowing how far away your driver was. And to try and solve this problem, Uber started out offering one service in one city, San Francisco. A simple app where from anywhere in the city, you could book a car to pick you up from one place and drop you off at another. that was it. That's what's called in business an MVP, a minimal viable product. Today though, you can order Ubers all around the world, and you have so many different options about what type of vehicle you can book. Back in 2010, it was just whatever car was available. Now you have UberX, UberX Share, Uber Comfort, Uber Exec, Uber Green, Uber Scooters, and even Uber Copter. So what's the point here? Well, if Uber from day one in 2010 tried to strive for transport perfection in offering all those different options, they would have failed. Instead, they knew they had to focus on their MVP first, then move on to the next thing or feature, and so on. And actually, the same goes for sport. MVP to me doesn't mean most valuable player, it means minimal viable performance. And what this means is, yes, you can still strive for the perfect game like Michael Jordan or Sabalenka, but you also set an MVP, which means that the disappointment that comes from not reaching perfection is alleviated by reaching a still acceptable level of performance. I see the MVP as a way to avoid that disappointment, frustration, or anger, and instead it allows you to bounce back quicker to have another crack at perfection. So the perfect game might be scoring a hat trick in football, but the MVP might be getting a couple of shots on target, because that still shows you're getting into the right areas in the box. This still signals a sign of progress and success in some form. Some athletes have an alternative to this, particularly in track and field, where, say in running for example, you'll have an A goal, a B goal, and a C goal in relation to what time you want to run. And of course, you always go for the A goal to begin with, but for whatever reason on that day, you're just not on it. Your body's not in sync with your mind, there's a bit of bad luck, whatever. And that A goal very quickly becomes impossible to reach. But if you have other markers of still a good performance to fall back on instead of a great performance, that enables you to not get trapped in the toxic cycle of reaching for perfectionism and then facing the inevitable punch to the gut every time that you don't reach it. An MVP still gives you the option to be proud of your efforts, even if the outcome was less than ideal. And this is often enough to fuel another comeback or another charge towards your biggest goals. It helps build the mental resilience necessary to keep pushing on despite the endless setbacks a life in sport brings. The harsh reality is that as an athlete, you'll never be perfect. But that's okay if you learn to adopt a mentality that accepts this lesson. There are many other harsh life lessons that all athletes need to learn if they're to reach the top. And so to best prepare you for navigating these, you should watch this next video here.